I just saw him ram his car into my back, and I whipped into my window, and I blacked out.
The first arriving engine company reported 6 patients, 3 critical, 3 moderate of injuries, with positive entrapment.
Is this really happening? Are you joking? Is this a joke? Am I dreaming? Am I going to wake up from this bad nightmare? And then you realize, no, it really is reality.
These are Jacob Ivascu, Drake Ruiz, and Daniel Hawkins. They were 16 years old when a terrible man decided to end their lives. And the reason he did this is outrageous, to say the least.
Ding dong ditch is something that almost every person I've talked to has done that. It's a youth where you go and simply ring someone's doorbell and then take off.
How low do you have to stoop to kill a bunch of kids for doing a ding-dong ditch prank? This is the full story of the teens who were tragically killed in a ding-dong ditch prank gone wrong. There will always be teenagers, and their ways of having fun evolve with every generation. But some pranks are timeless. Ding Dong Ditch has probably been around since people have had doors. It's fun, an innocent prank. You ring someone's doorbell and you run away. Of course, there are more extreme versions around too. And sure, you could get into trouble if you pester someone over and over again. No one would want that, especially at night. But usually, bar a few nasty verbal exchanges, no one gets hurt. This is why so many teens around the world still do it. Sadly, the boys in today's story weren't so lucky. Our story begins in Corona, California. Corona is a 150,000 people town in Riverside County, and no, it has nothing to do with coronavirus. Corona means crown in Spanish. Corona is 45 miles away from Los Angeles, so it's a perfect, cheaper suburb for young families and anyone who enjoys some peace and quiet. Before the 1980s, Corona was mostly an agricultural town filled with orchards and ranches. Now, it's a safe family town full of public schools, shops, and parks. So for the kids in today's story, Corona was a perfect place to grow up. Or so they thought. Jacob Ivascu, Drake Ruiz, and Daniel Hawkins had been best friends for what seemed like forever. They were born around 2003 and grew up close to each other. By 2020, all families were friends with each other, and the 3 boys would sometimes hang out with their brothers too. When they weren't all hanging out together, they were making silly TikTok videos. Daniel's dad, Craig Hawkins, said of the 3 friends, they relished in living. Life itself was celebratory. Craig was in awe at how his son and his friends could make a fun video out of practically anything, from eating junk food to walking down the street. The 3 teens were also part of a much larger 80-people youth group who went to the local church and participated in events that brought the whole community together. Pastor Taylor Mendoza remembers how everyone was on the floor laughing when the 3 boys performed a song at the Fortnite video game during a lip-sync battle. But Taylor also remembers the boys being well-behaved and quite mature for their age when they needed to be.
Talking about a 16-year-old boy who's 6'3", is incredibly intelligent, incredibly athletically gifted, had a great future ahead of him. My son was a delight.
When they weren't with their youth group or at school, the boys enjoyed playing video games, sports, and doing sleepovers at their families' homes. On January 19th, 2020, Daniel Hawkins asked his dad if Jacob, Drake, and their slightly older friend Sergio could come over for the night. Craig said, of course. He remembers, I just remember the joy of them beaming from ear to ear that we said yes. In the evening, the boys tossed a ball in the front yard, then they had something to eat, and around 10 p.m., 6 boys jumped into Sergio's car. Jacob and his 13-year-old brother Joshua, Daniel and his 13-year-old brother, also Joshua, Drake, and Sergio, who was driving. An hour later, the Hawkins family received a call. 3 of the 6 boys were dead. The other 3 were in critical condition. Anyone who has lost a child will tell you it is the worst thing they have ever experienced. Losing a loved one is hard enough, but when you know that person had a whole life ahead of them, it is all the more heartbreaking. Jacob, Drake, and Daniel's families had lost their sons in a flash. They didn't have the chance to say goodbye or at least play one last video game with them. Initially, the only thing they knew was that the 6 boys had rammed their Prius into a tree. Miraculously, the driver, Sergio, had survived.
First arriving engine company reported 6 patients, 3 critical, 3 moderate of injuries, with positive entrapment.
And the boys who survived would be scarred for life. Imagine losing your brothers and besties like that.
I don't know what I'm gonna do without them.
It was just as nightmarish for the boys' parents.
And there's the shock. You're like, is this really happening? Are you joking? Is this a joke? Am I dreaming? Am I going to wake up from this bad nightmare? And then you realize, no, it really is reality.
It's really sad to think Jacob, Drake, and Daniel didn't even have the chance to realize they were going to die. The car crash happened so fast, they could hardly tell what was happening.
Yet, Daniel, Drake, and Jacob did not know how close the moment of their final breath will be.
But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. There were 3 survivors to the crash, and they all remembered the same thing. Sergio did not crash the car because he was reckless or intoxicated. He was forced into the tree by an angry man they'd played Ding Dong Ditch with earlier that night.
A man has been arrested and he's been charged with murder.
Family members say it was a prank that escalated into that man ramming the car that was carrying teenagers.
When you have 3 young people lose their lives, that hits us home. A lot of us are parents ourselves.
In the late hours of January 19th, the 6 boys were out driving with one purpose only, to play Ding Dong Ditch. Earlier that evening, Jacob's little brother suggested 2 activities for the night.
We dared Jacob Ivascu to either jump into a pool at night or go Ding Dong Ditch a house.
They chose Ding Dong Ditch and off they went. But that night, they ended up on the wrong person's doorstep. This is 42-year-old Anurag Chandra. At the time of the murders, Chandra was out on bail for domestic violence. That night, he'd drank 12 beers by himself at home. When the boys rang his doorbell, he got so angry, he decided to kill them. The boys ran into their car, but Chandra jumped in his Infiniti too. He started chasing them, going faster and faster.
Gentlemen apparently came out, and then they got ready, got in the car, took off. And then after they'd taken off, they had realized that he had apparently got in his car and came looking for them.
Initially, the boys didn't even realize what was happening. They thought Chandra had given up and someone else was speeding up behind them. But then they looked through the rearview mirror.
I just saw these brights behind me and I realized that he was getting closer and closer, and I was like, what's this dude's problem? And that's when one of them was like, oh shoot, it's the guy that we Ding Dong Ditch.
The boys tried to rush toward the freeway and lose the angry man, but he was going at full speed. Reportedly, Anurag reached 99 miles per hour that night.
Friends started screaming, they're like, make it to the freeway, make it to the freeway, like try to lose him there.
Imagine the fear you feel as this crazy man is out to get you. You have no way of talking him down. All you can do is run, or in Sergio's case, drive, but he wasn't fast enough. At around 90 miles per hour, Anurag smashed his car into the boys' Prius.
I saw him ram his car into my back, and I whipped into my window, and I blacked out.
When he woke up, Sergio realized the situation was dire. The paramedics were dragging his friends' bodies out of the car.
That's when it really hit, that they're gone.
Chandra fled the scene. Yep, domestic abuse, DUI, and triple murder weren't enough. He had to do a hit and run too. Luckily though, there were several witnesses who saw his gut-wrenching crash. So when he got in his car, the witness followed him to a nearby residence. There, they circled him and called the police. Anurag Chandra was arrested within minutes. All he could tell the police was that the boys made him extremely, extremely angry. Yeah. Imagine if your kids were there instead, Chandra. So many people came together after the tragedy. Brent Howard, a leader of the youth group, said, "It doesn't seem real. You hear tragedies like this happen in the news, you don't think it's going to happen to you." The church group rallied around the surviving boys and did all they could to welcome them back home from the hospital. It was substantial help for the grieving families, but nothing could fill the void of losing your child in the blink of an eye. Now, the parents wanted to see Chandra pay.
Now he faces 3 counts of murder.
3 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder under special circumstances.
Chandra was not the only one who couldn't be home anymore. Imagine the chaos and disruption you suffer when you try to get justice for a loved one.
The last 9 days took us in places we did not plan to be. The crash site, hospital rooms, the courtroom, houses of mourning, the cemetery, funeral homes.
But Craig made it a goal in itself to follow this case closely and remind Chandra just how much suffering he's caused. First of all, he said he wanted to be at the courthouse every single day throughout Chandra's trial.
I want them to see my younger son, who did survive, and my daughter and my wife, and go, and then the other families. These are the families' lives who've been forever changed. This guy basically played God.
It's true. Chandra needed to be reminded he was only a small, frustrated man with an alcohol problem, not God, not someone who can decide who lives and who dies. And while Chandra was forgotten about in a jail cell, the boys' families did everything they could to remember and honor them.
Friends and family have set up a Remember the Three website and a GoFundMe page for the boys to help with legal and medical expenses.
Their friends from school and church paid their tributes and reminded everyone of their infectious joy of life.
From now on, I will live my life for each and every one of them. Rest in peace, number 89, 69, and 25.
Apart from remembering the boys for who they were, one topic came up over and over again. How could someone murder 3 teens for playing a prank?
It's unspeakably tragic, Vinny. I watched that. I'm almost in tears watching that. I have cousins, though their ages, they do the same thing.
Ding dong ditch is something that almost every person I've talked to has done that. It's as a youth where you go and simply ring someone's doorbell and then take off.
To complete the picture of his vile character, Chandra pleaded not guilty. After all, do you expect a man who abuses his own family and kills teenagers to ever admit he's wrong? And in the courtroom, it became all too clear that Anurag Chandra was guilty. Based on physical evidence and witness statements, it was concluded that he intentionally rammed the boy's Prius, causing it to collide with a tree. In April 2023, the New York Times confirmed Anurag Chandra, now 45, was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. John Hall, the district attorney's spokesperson, said, "The response and actions taken by the defendant are egregious and extremely disproportionate to a teen ringing a doorbell and running away." Exactly. If I could sum it up in a word, it would be disproportionate. Also, evil? It's a debatable term, sure, but what is evil if not someone who kills kids for a prank? During his trial, Chandra testified for himself. He said he was afraid for his family's safety that night after he saw a person with a hooded sweatshirt outside his home. He only chased them down with his car to verbally express his anger. But the prosecution reminded everyone Chandra had drank 12 beers that night. And ramming your car into another car at 90 miles per hour is not verbally expressing your anger. Jacob's dad, Alex, said he was really angry listening to Chandra's lies throughout his trial. But even more difficult to watch was his little son, Josh, take the stand and remember every horrific detail from that night. What's worse, Josh was living with the guilt that perhaps he was at fault for all those deaths, as he was the one who suggested they play Ding Dong Ditch. Guys, this just breaks my heart. Deputy District Attorney Kevin Beachman reveled in the victory. We're very pleased that justice was served for the victims and mourn with their families over the losses they suffer. Chandra's defense attorney, on the other hand, said the verdict was unfortunate and that there was too much passion put into this case. Excuse me? Even with Chandra's lack of remorse and bogus stories, the boys' families are speaking of forgiveness and moving on.
And what is so powerful about this story, Vinny, is Craig Hawkins, the father of Daniel, who we spoke to in that interview, he's all about forgiveness. Even though Anurag Chandra is pleading not guilty, he's not so far taken any ownership for any part of what he did.
Chandra will be sentenced in July 2023. Everyone expects a life sentence. It's hard to see both points of view in a case so senseless and tragic. Shockingly enough, though, this Ding Dong Ditch murder is not an isolated case.
Julie, Chad Uphoff faces 4 felony counts of terroristic threats, and while he sits in jail, his wife sits down with me to explain how he ended up there instead of at home enjoying the holiday weekend.
This case happened in West Omaha, where Ding Dong Ditch was such a trending prank in 2017 that it began to seriously bother the community.
They were constantly hitting
our house. Apoph's wife, Tammy, complained to the school about the pranking teenagers, and the school said there was nothing they could do about it. Ding Dong Ditch wasn't illegal, and it was perfectly lighthearted fun, albeit annoying. On Halloween 2017, a group of 4 13 and 14-year-old boys arrived on Apoph's doorstep, rang his doorbell, and ran away. Apoph then got into his Jeep and chased the boys. It was clear that if any of the boys would have tripped and fallen, Apoph would have killed them with his SUV. Still, Tammy insists that the boys shouldn't have insisted with their annoying habit. It's sad to see how much a childish prank can annoy some people. Not only is it sad, but it is worrying. Everyone was a kid once, and many of us have children or young relatives. Can't these people remember what it was like to be a kid? And if they were the quiet kid who didn't play any pranks, can't they show some empathy for a young soul with a penchant for silly fun? What do you even do as a teenager in a world that feels increasingly dangerous? Do you stop having fun for fear of drunk, violent people? Do you resort to TikTok and internet-based fun? No, even that can be dangerous. Just look at all the online bullying. We can't stop living our lives just because of a few psychopaths. They don't deserve to win this game. The best revenge is living well, and let's just hope we can all steer clear of such monsters. Thanks for watching, you guys. What do you think about this case? Do you know of other pranks gone horribly wrong? Let me know in a comment, and before you leave, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that bell button. That way you won't miss another episode. See you next time, and stay safe.